The Own Your Intuitive podcast is for the creatives, spiritual entrepreneurs, and light workers in the world. The shining ones who have been told to dim their light and stop believing in magic. I say screw that. The time to rise is now. To bring your gifts out into the world in a big way, creating a business that feeds your soul and your bank account. You are a magical being with the potential to change the world, one human at a time. The time for you to own your intuitive is now. Happy Friday, magical beings of love light. I am so excited because today I have as a guest someone that I met actually over a year ago. We kind of crossed paths at an event in San Diego, and you were really important in my journey, and you probably don't know this.
I don't know
even
this.
Saying that just, I know, somewhat, like, it just fills me up with a little bit of emotion because I was in a bit of a crisis at that event, and I'd gone up and done my 126 talk, and you pulled me aside and, said, thank you for doing that talk about mental illness because, it had, impacted you in some way in your life. And your time that you took to say that to me was really, really, like, I'm so grateful because I was having a time at that place.
Oh.
And so I know that you're in this world to do a lot of magical stuff. And I know that you do a lot of magical stuff through retreat. And I'm just super jazzed to share your story with the listeners today and what brought you into standing so fully in your stardust. So welcome, Darla LeDoux, to the podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. And I really admire the way you lead so transparently. We had a series on our podcast called Transforming Out Loud. And it's such a inner journey to get to the place of really sharing what's going on. And we never know what's really going on for someone behind the scenes that we think has it all together, and they've got it going on, and we've all got stuff. So thank you for sharing that.
So true. And that's why I think it's so valuable and important to share how we get to where we are today, because it's not a beautiful linear line of like, oh, look at all the success I'm having. Look at how easy this was. There's always twists and turns and, obstacles and things that come at us from the universe. And, whether we're aware of the lesson or the gift, it's always a beautiful journey.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So as an introduction, as you had said you were listening, my favorite question to start is just simply your origin story, Darla. What brought you onto this earth and into this universe?
Well, we can speculate about that based on my childhood experience, but I'll tell you, a bit about what brought me to this work. And specifically, I work with service-based entrepreneurs who are coming from a heart-centered place. They're somewhere on their spiritual journey. So they may be fully operating with a commitment to their intuition, or they may be really in the left brain, logical, linear world and considering opening up more of their spiritual side through their business. Mm-hmm. And I work with them to create small retreats as a part of the way they do business. So we look at what are their skills and gifts and talents that they can use on retreat that maybe they aren't using in the way they're doing business now, and to really help them transition into groups and all of that. And the reason that I do that, it kind of was by accident, because I had a client, I started doing retreats and I loved it. And then I had a client say, gosh, every time there's space in your program, you just bring in like 5 new people. How do you do it? And the obvious thing was, well, I hosted a retreat and people want to work with me. And I never thought about teaching that. So that's kind of how I came to teach this specifically around retreats. But how I started doing them is my life was changed on retreat. So I say I'm a recovering engineer. I grew up in Tower, Minnesota, population 502.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And I was good at math and science. So my math teacher said, you should be an engineer. Like, if you can, you should. I didn't know what an engineer was. No one in my immediate family had gone to college, let alone knew what an engineer was. So
Right.
I just took the advice because the thing that I knew was I wanted to get out of there and make something of myself, right? So I became an engineer. I worked at Procter & Gamble, one of the top companies for engineering in the world at the time. And I really, really loved it until I didn't. And it was like, I loved, being a young engineer and a woman engineer and like having this sense of authority working for this company. And I loved all of that. But I was trained as a coach in my corporate job. So they nominated people from throughout the organization to get trained in this particular approach to coaching that I kind of call for shorthand diversity coaching. And it was really about helping people who are reporting to each other to have a really great working relationship by getting clear about their systematic bias that they might bring into the relationship. So we're looking at our judgment about gender or race or sexual orientation or age and getting it out on the table so it doesn't impact the way you work with each other. It was super innovative. And
very innovative.
Really, I realize that now, so ahead of the time. And I loved it. I just fell in love with coaching. All of the training was delivered through retreat. It was extremely stressful for me because up until that point, I was, I was an engineer. I got good grades. I did the right thing. I pleased my management. That was my MO to survive life based on what I experienced growing up. It was like, just don't do what you see other people doing. Just do the right thing and be smart, and you get love and you get gold stars and approval and
all the checklist.
Exactly. Yeah. And in that training, I realized I started to get access to a truth, which was, I'm just programmed this way. It's not actually who I am. And when I started to open that up, I thought, why doesn't everybody not know this? Like, why is this the first time hearing of this? Why is this not taught in schools? And I did eventually leave corporate and I went and taught high school for a few years, where I could sneak in coaching because I was doing it in my corporate job and it was endorsed, but it was like 2 hours a week, and ultimately it wasn't going to change the world. And I started to get really discontent with spending most of my time engineering fake juice, really changing the world. Fake juice. Yes. I worked on.
Find that. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah. So at the time, Procter & Gamble owned a company called Sunny Delight. And that was my brand I worked on. So,
got you.
Helping parents to buy their kids more fake juice. And
that's what that was. Okay.
Yeah. I learned a lot in that role, and I still have so much respect for Procter & Gamble and everything I learned there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I love working and I love contributing. And I was like, I'm not contributing to something that matters to me. And this coach training opened my eyes to, hey, there's something else in this, human side of things that I really care about. And I had the pivot point was where I really got I got interested, I should say. Commitment came way later. But the pivot point was I was in a performance review and I got promoted, which was great. And my boss said, your soft skills are really great, Darla, but you might want to tone them down a bit here because they'll only get you so far.
And so which soft skills were they talking about? Because when I hear soft skills, I think nurturing mother-like and all of that nice.
Yes. Yes. And like the people side of things, right? So I would always gravitate toward projects that were actually in connection with our customers and the people who bought our products. And there were 2 tracks at the company. And one was that track, right? Where we're making the connection between how people think and why they buy. And then there's the technical track where you're actually engineering the product.
Gotcha.
And the technical track, people who take that track tend to get promoted much faster than the people who take the people side, right? And so today, my whole mission in my work in normalizing transformation on the planet and getting more money in the hands of retreat leaders stems from that conversation where it was so clear and where I got a glimpse into how we systematically reward certain skills over other skills, which is why our world looks the way it does, right? If you can make something faster, more efficiently, more artificially, you get rewarded more than if you can spread love.
So my next question for you,
Yeah,
is like, did you get Procter and Gamble right out of school? Like, was that like just a quick transition for you? So that was a pretty amazing first step in the journey.
Yeah.
And how long did you stay at Procter and Gamble? Just out of curiosity.
So I was there 5 years the first time, and then actually once. The next piece of my pivot story, I went back into corporate. I was working in marketing, and I actually got recruited back to Procter and Gamble, which never happens. They're like a promote from within company, but this was the universe working in my favor. Like I had gotten divorced, and my stepdad died in the same summer, and it was like that. We tolerate a lot of discomfort, and we need something to kind of get our attention. And that was it for me. Like I failed at my marriage. My stepdad died. Like he was diagnosed with cancer and died 3 months later. And life wasn't the same. And truly failing at my marriage opened the door for me to be willing to fail at a lot of things.
And so you had to be fairly young at this point still.
I was in my 30s, early 30s.
30s at that point. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm 45. I look young.
You do look young. Hey, I'm power to the 40s. We're rocking the 40s hard right now. I'm also in my 40s. So.
Exactly.
You're seasoning well, Darla.
Thank you. Yes. So because like kind of all of this was happening, I got to this moment of surrender. And I teach my clients something I call the anatomy of a transformation, which is key as a retreat leader to really understand how transformation works and how to tell where someone is in their own transformation. And this was kind of my first experience of the stage, which is pivotal, which is surrender. Because I knew, first of all these things that happened weren't necessarily in my control. Mm-hmm. I had enough training before this happened that I knew that there was something planted in here that was like, life is happening for me, not to me. Like I had that kind of sense.
Where do you think that programming came from that you knew that?
Landmark education.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. So I did, I had that coach training in corporate, and then I did the Landmark curriculum when I was a teacher, because I went from engineering to teaching. And I started having the same exact complaints. It was like everybody was equally annoying at my new job as they were at my old job. And I was like, wait, this is probably me. Like, this is my fault. So that's when I took Landmark's training. So I had like this sense of wisdom, but I'll tell you, because you're talking about the magical, I was really opening up my magic, my intuition, my sense of power in the world, and, ability to speak things into existence. And it was very, very scary. And that's when I met my ex and got married. It was like, I was like right there on the cusp of this, amazingness. And then I was like, oh, let's marry an addict and see if we can create some drama. And,
so we can see it's so fascinating at the peak of discomfort that we can call to us the very thing that will keep us in that, short comfort zone to prevent us from our full expansion. Like it's a really powerful thing to witness once you know it, to go back and see where you can witness it in your life.
And those moments you can look back on and you remember where you were standing and what you were wearing. And it was like one of those moments when I met my ex, and I just, like, I can play it back and go, that's where I got hooked. That's where I went, yes, please. And invited drama right into my life.
So then you were with him for how long, or them?
A year, just a year.
I'm not sure where I went with that conversation.
Him, a year, yes.
Only a year.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that was a
Yeah.
quick filter through
It
on,
was.
so how I love this kind of story because, you called that relationship to you to,
I
and I
did.
say this with love because I know that those who are listening can look into their own lives through the experiences that we have both had in order to see the reflection of what they may be going through themselves. And so like you saw that rather quickly as being, a toxic
I
relationship and
did.
not.
I was so grateful that I had that experience and a lot of training. And also, and he was struggling with addiction, and my dad was an alcoholic. So he still actually actively drinks. So it was so healing, Tamara, to actually get, like, I went through the whole process of rehab. He got kicked out. I stayed. I went through all the training of codependency and all of that.
Oh, wow.
And to be able to see and get and own and heal that, like, his addiction wasn't about me, and neither was my dad's, right? So it was like this perfect divine experience for my healing and my growth. I didn't know I needed it, or there was a part of me that wished I didn't need it, but that's what I needed.
And I think because some of my listeners, because of the mental health journey that, I've been with through my family and hearing your words there. And I think that I just want to pause here with that thought, like it wasn't my fault. Like I couldn't save that whole codependency piece. So for anyone who's listening and, from the perspective of the mental illness and also from the perspective of the addiction, there is a really powerful moment when you no longer take responsibility for the other person in that lens. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it was a really, I remember the moment where I talked myself into getting married, even though I had this sense that it wasn't the best idea. And then I remember the moment where I said, I'm choosing me. When I talked myself into it, I thought, well, it's okay if my life isn't that great. Like my ex had a son and I was a stepchild. So I had, it was like this whole pattern repeat of like, let me help take care of him and make his life better. It's okay if my life isn't that great. And so in making the choice to leave, it was really this restoring myself to power and saying, actually, my life really does matter and it really is important. And I look back on that person who made those decisions and I think, how am I that person? But that's where I was. That was what I needed to heal. And I believe it's, people who are in this conversation, they're being called to something.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to heal at that deeper level because of what I'm called to, and maybe not everybody is, but I know that was true for me.
And I think it's really like, I'm reflecting back on your story so far. And like, even the innate knowing that you are here for the greater good of, the population of Earth, of however we want to word it, because like you were supporting people right away, even in your Procter Gamble through the retreats that you were running, even though that you'd said that they were really stressful. And then you even like thinking from the level of the teacher, but the awareness that you had, because you started Landmark, right? And then, you keep talking about the education that you were giving yourself and the knowledge that you were and the experiences that you were doing. Because I know from the perspective of, an engineer, joining a spiritual anything isn't quite the first step that, you take. So it feels like Landmark was a great bridge.
Segue.
To really starting to understand a greater relationship with, the universe and such. So can you share that kind of story of like the
spiritual side?
Yes, I love spiritual stories.
Yeah. So as an engineer, it was not easy to embrace necessarily. I spoke with someone this morning who's an attorney who's kind of where I was, where you're surrounded by logical, linear thinkers who are, asking you the questions and self-reflection from a logical, linear standpoint, right? Like, how are you going to make money at that? Who's going to pay for that? And so I didn't necessarily go all in saying spirit is guiding me.
Right.
and I believe part of my purpose here is to help make the sublime practical, like that spiritual side can be accessible to people who are where I was, where,
Yes.
it doesn't have to be this, crazy woo-woo idea. But I had enough little experiences, in that time when I was getting divorced and my stepdad died and I was in this job, I was in corporate again, but I didn't love the job. It was easy, which was nice because my life was taking up a lot of space. But I wasn't passionate. And that was that moment of surrender. I was driving in my car and I was like, I had been thinking through all the logical ways to like get out of this situation and do something different, but my brain literally could not think of it. And I said a prayer in my car driving, and I don't share this very often. I was driving in my car and thinking through, and one of the things I was trying to solve is I had debt from my marriage and my divorce. Like it happened so quickly and my ex was like on drugs. So I just like assumed all the debt and I'm like, I have the capacity to solve this. I'll just deal with it rather than deal with him. So I have this debt and I don't know what to do. And I'm in this job that I don't really love. And it's going to take me many years to pay the debt in this job and all these things. So I'm driving down the road, thinking, and then I just surrender. I said a prayer and I felt the energy shift in that surrender, right? And then my brain, I'm a little bit lighter, but my mind is still kind of floating through, ideas for solving things. And I'm thinking about something. And all of a sudden my car swerves on the highway out of nowhere, just like, and I didn't do it. And I was so freaked out. And I was like, what was that about? And I went back to, well, what was I thinking about when the swerve happened? And what I was thinking about was all the different ways I was going to pay off debt. And one of them was to cash out a retirement fund that I had. And I was thinking about that when the car swerved. And I was like, is that a sign? And so I did, and I didn't have very much faith at the time in signs, but I was like, what the hell? I asked, right? I asked for guidance and this is what I got. So I'm going to do it. So I went and I cashed out my retirement from being a teacher, which paid my debt, and I was debt free. And I was only a teacher for a few years, so it was amazing. The retirement was great. And immediately, Tamara, after I made that transaction, I got a call, and that's when I got offered the job to come back to Procter & Gamble.
Wow.
And the pay was like 40 times more than my previous pay. And within a few months, the brand I was working for got bought and I got a severance package. So it was like this quick, cash infusion from the universe. And I used the severance to go to coaching school and start my business. And it happened like that. And in that moment of surrender.
Yeah. So there's such a powerful thing to say that even in that moment, even though you weren't, in the level of faith you currently are, you were still in that space to receive the sign and take that an action. Because I think that that's a really important thing to know. We in all of the podcasts that I do, there's these moments, right? Where, we receive the message and, if anyone's listening, you can hear and feel I got shivers, by the way, Darla, through that whole thing, right? And that spirit guidance or that nudge or that message that came through and the willingness to take action, inspired action on that receive. So that's powerful. So how long ago was that?
Oh, 10 years. 10, 12 years, something like that. Yeah. And that, so I had a lot of those little experiences for years after that. I mean, I started my business, I got into studying universal law, and manifesting, though that's not my favorite word, and had a lot of miracles show up.
Wait. I like that. What do you mean? I love to know why you don't like manifestation isn't your favorite word.
Well, I think it's more the popularization of the idea of manifesting and the way it's taught. I don't always love, right? The idea that so many people use it to make themselves wrong, right? Like, oh, I'm not manifesting because I'm not perfect enough or whatever. And what it really is where the desire is present, the way is present. Like whatever it is there around us.
Mm-hmm.
Now. It's not like I have to be really good and then I get rewarded by this magical God in the sky who's going to send me things. It's already there. It's about increasing our awareness and our ability to see what's there and allow it to come in.
Well, it was funny because when you were talking earlier, right? Like you had mentioned something about helping, these creatives and these light workers and these spiritual entrepreneurs put the money in their hands. And I was pinged that, let's have a conversation about money. And so it was interesting that you shared the story from the car that you don't normally share, which then kind of began this beautiful story about abundance and money in your life. Because, I think that this is a huge conversation that isn't talked about enough. Right? Which is the acceptance of money into our lives.
Yes. Yeah, we don't like to talk about it necessarily. What I love about being a business coach and why I continue to be a business coach when there's a lot of different types of coaching is our money is such an amazing mirror for how open our channel is and what we're willing to receive. And for
Can you elaborate on that for some people? Because they're probably like, I'm open. I swear I'm open, but I don't see the reflection of that.
And I don't know that everybody's mirror is money because not everybody's in that conversation, right? But if you step into the conversation about money and value, it's such an amazing mirror. I did an event once where I put up a PowerPoint slide of my income, and it was, I don't know which direction this video is going, but it was, like a roller coaster, generally trending up, but, dips and peaks and valleys. And I could point to exactly what happened in my life at like what healing I needed every time my revenue dipped. Like I could tell the story of what happened in that moment.
I love that.
It's a great reflection to look at where we need to grow. Because, and this is part of what I teach my retreat leaders with, the anatomy of a transformation. The first piece is discomfort. And we are amazing at tolerating discomfort. Like, we might have loose boundaries and people are taking advantage of us, but we really like them and we want to be a good person. So we'll tolerate that. Or our jeans are getting too tight and we know we, either need to change something about our health or get new pants, right? But we're really good at tolerating discomfort. And we do this in so many areas. But if you're running a business and your revenue dips, it's not something that you can just tolerate, right? Because you're going to have to fire people or like you have to do something. So
the problem.
To me, it's a great way to, for life to get our attention. In terms of, the idea of having light workers earn more, to me, this is about a bigger societal conversation. And this is, I think this conversation I had with this attorney earlier this morning is perfect. And she shared a story, which I won't get into, about, an industry she's in where they're making these decisions that make no sense societally, right? Like human beings are hurt by the decisions that are made, but they're all logical decisions. Right? So our left brain, linear, logical mind can rationalize anything. We can rationalize why it is such a beautiful convenience and service to sell mom's fake juice, like we can rationalize anything. And we value that, right? As a society, like how do you do things faster, better, quicker, more efficiently? And we pay for that. And yet there's such stigma about paying for transformation and healing and support, right? It's like such a a place where people price compare, and there's a limit in people's minds to what they'll pay for that. But it's the very thing that is like our lifeblood. And people continue to allow themselves to be underpaid for that magical work.
Agreed.
So it's a bigger, it's a bigger conversation about what it represents in terms of what we value in the world.
Well, and I have just come into like wanting to talk about money on the regular, because I think that it's been really interesting to notice when you ask people what they desire or what they want, and they have this like innate sense to say like, oh, it's not the money, it's, the experience. It's not the money that I desire. It's, I want to help, with mental illness. I want to support the community. It's not the money. It's, whatever. And it's like, why can't we say with love that money is simply energy and we desire money? Like, you know what I mean? We need the money to support, and fund the movements we're here on this earth to create.
Yeah, exactly. When we have more, we can do more. And I would rather have money in the hands of people with our value systems than the people who have more influence right now in the world because they've been willing to receive money.
Mm-hmm. That's a very, very important point. I love that, Darla. Thank you.
It's like we get to hire people to work in their brilliance who can come to a loving work environment and not a toxic work environment, right? Like that alone is very motivating to me. So we won't be willing to receive it if we can't speak about it. And we can't give it love and attention. And, I still have my own growth to do because I've recently gotten a vision of where I'm going. And it's like, wow, a lot of money needs to flow through me to make that happen. Right. So there's always a new level. And the more quickly you become willing to receive, Spirit says, yes, we can work through her.
Yes. Yes.
If we're not willing, we can't get more. Right.
When I do, one of the principles that I think is so important is like, we need to create the space within ourselves. Like, so what does that next level look like? What is the work that I need to do within myself to hold that and to let that flow through me at a bigger way, right? And so like you being able to take that capacity to these beautiful humans that are running these retreats. And so can you explain, was it because of the retreats that you were running in Procter & Gamble that led you to kind of have the affinity to serve on that space and that level?
Yeah, a lot of my transformation came through retreat. Like that's how it was delivered to me. So I have that love. I think a lot of us are being tapped on the shoulder with this vision of leading groups in transformational experiences. And part of it is because it works. So, when we're paying a coach, so I'm a coach, I'm trained as a coach. I love coaching. Some people come into the work of retreats and they don't like coaching necessarily. There's some other thing that's pulling them. For me, I'm a coach. I love I love transformation. I love possibility. I love, transforming beliefs, all of that. In one-on-one coaching, we can have major transformation. And when you're in a group, it's deeper, like something different happens, because when you're paying someone to be your coach, there can be some part of you that goes, yeah, but I'm paying you. And of course you have to like me, or something like that. Right. Whereas, because a lot of our transformation and our healing is these deep beliefs that we think are shameful and we think we shouldn't share, and we think no one else has, and we think people wouldn't like us if they knew. And so in the group context, when some other person who happens to be on this retreat can hear and see and witness and love us, and they have no vested interest in it, there's something deeper that transpires. One of my favorite quotes is by a guy named Kurt Wright. And he says, as a human being, we can't accept a part of ourselves that we haven't shared with another human being and had validated rather than violated.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That hit me right down in the sacral today. Darla, I just want you to know that.
Awesome. Yeah, because, we're violated growing up, whether we have, what we would deem to be abuse or, a physical violation, we're violated in so many ways when we put our, be our full selves and are the people who, we came into this world to chose to raise us, can't be with it. Right. And shut us down or judge or redirect or whatever, want what's best for us that doesn't look like what our soul really wants. All of those incidents are violations that we hold and think something is wrong with this part of me and I can't share it. And so the retreat is just a beautiful container because it's experiential. So we can put people into scenarios that their ego mind hasn't predetermined how they want to behave because we don't know what's going to happen, right? It's experiential. Whereas in most of our life, myself included, right? We design everything to be in control. Like I know if I know how to show up for a podcast interview. And I know I have my lights on and I know, this is likely to happen because of it. Like everything is designed to create control. So the retreat puts us out of the place where our ego mind has already pre-decided how it's going to go. It helps us see something we haven't seen with witnesses. And that's why it's such powerful healing.
And I'm going to add in that it also adds an emotional value to it as well that will anchor the transformation that we wouldn't normally have if we didn't have that emotional connection to it as well. It's, to me, experience, especially in a transformational space such as this, is almost always tied to emotion, right? Whether we, like, I cannot remember a single retreat. Like I just came back from one this past weekend where I'm like, you just come back and you're like, I have a new level of being because of the emotion that I allowed myself to feel through in such a short amount of time in this very, very specific container.
Yes. Can you say more about that? How because you're working with your clients transformationally too. What role have you seen emotion playing?
Well, I think that in order for us to fully, you leaned right in here, in order for us to fully, I love it, feel like the power of the full circle. So I always say, like, we begin a process or we go into something where we currently are, homeostasis, whatever you want to say, right? And by choosing to go to a retreat or choosing to have a particular experience, we are already in our minds, we have an intent. We already have an intention of what we would like for the retreat to, like, we would like to have, or the experience, or whether you admit it or not, it is happening on the subconscious level, right? And so for me, it's like these beautiful, like, how quickly are we willing to surrender the control enough to feel that feeling through? So we get, like, normally I walk into a retreat, sit down, I'm like, okay, I have this preset intention. And then immediately I'm receiving the emotional value to that because that was what I showed up ready to experience. And so it just keeping in that state of surrender, staying in that moment, being open to be as vulnerable as possible and to lift each other in that vulnerability and to show that unconditional love. It's like you get to have this container where that experience and that emotion travels around the entire gambit. You have the permission and the freedom for full expression so that you can leave there with that space again of, like, having gone full circle and back to your being again, but having experienced and released and let go along the way. So that's, like, kind of like the symbolic feeling that those containers feel like for me. And it's very much tied to the emotion you're allowing yourself to feel.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. And if anyone here leads retreats or has ever wanted to and gone to fill a retreat and it's, like, harder than you thought, for example, which can happen, it's because of that. Exactly. When someone's making a choice to come, they're opening this sacred container. And so it's not just like, oh, how much is the retreat? They're not making just that judgment on what the investment is. It's like, I'm going to travel. People are going to know I'm doing this because I might post on Facebook so that I'm visible in it, which is scary, right? Like, because now people start to ask you and well, what was that about? But they're making an emotional and energetic commitment to allowing this transformation to take place. And it starts the moment someone registers. which is why people procrastinate it, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm going to come, or I'm interested, but they wait. And it opens that up where, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I know I did, especially like when I was doing Landmark. That's all, I don't want to call it retreat, but it's all live experience based.
It's a container. So we'll just call
it. Yeah. When, leading up to a retreat, things always happen, right? It could be like magical, amazing things. It could be like shit hits the fan in your life. People get sick, people die. Like, I've never had a participant die, but like people in their life will pass away, or like something happens, which is bubbling up the thing that needs attention and needs transformation in the retreat. Have you had that happen for you, where like
always
a week before, or right when you register, it's like, oh, and then this happened?
Of course. I love to talk about that with my clients as well, right? Because, so off topic, but slightly on topic, is like, even at one of the retreats I ran last August, one of my participants' fathers passed while in the retreat, like while she was present, and having, that experience of choosing, because like there's a level in which you get to in spirituality where I probably don't see death the same way as everybody else, right? Because I see it as a rebirth day, if you will, going back to this beautiful consciousness that I came from. And so the gift involved in that, like I see somebody's passing, especially near a monumental transformation such as a retreat, as a gift of their energy for your transformation. Right? But we don't often see it that way, as like an added expansiveness, but 100% we will, our energy or our ego, because our ego is, as soon as you feed it one thing, will feed a whole bunch more, we'll look for the ways to keep us in the space that we know, in our known, comfort level. But 100%, even when I started writing the book with Angela, she was like, you guys you're going to get infestations of like things in your house. You're get sick. There's going to be all of these things because you are about to level up, and your ego is going to do whatever it needs to do to keep you safe.
Yes. Exactly. What a gift that she was there and could have that framing of the passing before going back to her family.
Well, and it was really interesting because like being in that container created a whole other level of conversation, that when we were doing some work as a group, instead of doing the work that was the group work, she had this beautiful channel experience where she wrote out what she would say at her father's funeral while sitting in that energy.
That's awesome.
I mean, retreats really are that powerful.
Yes. And for anyone listening, if you're like, oh my gosh, how would I handle it if someone, dad died on retreat? That's actually happened on one of my retreats too. And it was really divine, like timing. But that's where we want to be masters of our own philosophies and belief systems and energies, and like not be closeted about this, because you want to be able to be totally free to own that at the retreat, right? When something is coming up in someone's life and oh, wow, this is beautiful, perfect timing. But society would say, oh, we should be sad and grieve, right? As the leader, you have to be strong enough to own your beliefs and really offer that and contribute that to your participants.
So but that's another conversation completely about like the level of living into, right? Your being, like being your being, and then inviting others into that knowledge and that experience with you. And I think that you did a beautiful job of touching on that, right?
Exactly.
Can we geek out for a second?
Sure.
Let's talk spiritual laws. Where did you start to lean into that?
Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking of like what I would want people to get about the spiritual journey for me. So gratefully, when I started my business, I one thing, miracle. And I ended up in this event, this business training event where they offered a coaching program. And the person leading the event was coaching people at the microphone. And so much of the way he was coaching, I was like, oh my God, that's what I do. Like he does what I do. But then I was like, well, but he's actually doing it. And I'm like really undercharging people and not paying my rent. So actually I don't do that, but that's what I want to do. So I ended up joining their program and becoming part of a mastermind. And a huge part of it was universal law. So I'm so grateful that that was my first choice I made as a business owner to invest in that training, because it has made a world of difference in how I see things. And, I, in my high level program with my clients, I have a course on universal law, like my take on it. And like, I think it, for me, it is the thing I go back to as truth, right? And universal law, like they're all mirrored in nature. So if you wonder, like, is this a crazy idea that we humans have made up and it's bullshit, you can go to nature, and like nature doesn't have an ego. The rest of nature isn't trying to manipulate or control or anything. And you can see these things mirrored in nature. So for me, that something in the way it was taught to me, my own study of it, my own experiences, and then tying to nature made me say, this is truth, actually. Like these laws are truth. Like I resonate at the core of my being. And that's how I made decisions. And I still make decisions. In the beginning, though, it was much harder, right? So it was like, okay, even though my rational mind would say, making this decision, like maybe to invest in something like that mastermind, is going to take me this long to pay off in a logical, linear way of thinking. I know, universal law says there's the law of polarity, where there's a desire, there's a way, right? A desire for something can't exist in a greater realm than the way possible for it to come through you, right? Our debt, for example, is just a mirror of the level of earning we're supposed to be having that we haven't received yet.
Woo, that's a fun little, can you kind of just repeat that so everybody can hear that?
Yeah. No, it all ties back to where the debt came from, right? So if we're spending to fill a hole because we're unconscious and we're just like, well, maybe buying things will help me feel better, is a little different than, I know I desire a life at this level. I know I desire to have this kind of support in my life. And we're investing in that way, but we're not receiving the money that is, that mirrors that, right?
Yeah.
Right. Because the law of polarity, right? Left, right, up, down, debt, income.
Right.
It's telling us, because sometimes people, we get the desire of like, oh, I want to live a more abundant life. And I would like to not scour the travel sites to find the best deal on a flight, for example. Like I want to just be someone who just goes, here's where I want to go, click and buy, right? This is a common thing in our world, right? When people are traveling to masterminds and retreats and things and like trying to get the best deal and staying at the hotel down the street. And like, okay, I want to be a person who just does what I want.
Yes.
Right? It's that simple. Sometimes they put it on a credit card first and then the money comes, right? So that's just showing you this is the level that spirit is calling you to live at. Right. Now we've got to clear whatever is in the way of receiving that money, ideally before, but sometimes, it's like the declaration to the universe to say, yes, this is my yes. Show me how, right? Show me where the money is that matches this desire.
And I think what you're saying is really powerful, because it's like you're asking the universe to show you how, not you are, getting hyper like constrained on the how, hyper focused on the how. Like there's a surrender on some level to the how. right? You're allowing it to be a co-creation as opposed to, that brain of thought that is, I have to figure this out.
Exactly. And, I can tie back to when I cashed in my retirement, right? And that message I got, that my logical brain was like, no, you don't do that. Like, you're going to pay extra to take that money out early. You're losing money like that. Like, all of the traditional advice was there. Yet that was the message, right? So what happens is, just say I decide I want to go to a retreat, since that we're talking about that, because I know there's some transformation there for me. I'm going to put it on my credit card. I'm going to trust the universe that the money will come. And then the universe says, okay, here's where the money is, right? And then we don't listen. We talk ourselves out of it because of all of these rational things or whatever. We don't listen. We're afraid. We're nervous. We don't show up. We don't follow through. And that's where kind of it can start to break down for people.
Well, somebody I was talking to recently made a very bold statement. They're like, if you say yes to something, like if you say yes, and I want everybody to hear this, to a retreat, to a coach, to, some level of transformation for yourself, it's because the money is there.
Exactly.
Right. And so it's just simply tapping into it and allowing that to flow into your business and into, how you serve. And I think that that's a really powerful thing. If you're thinking about, even listening to Darla right now and you're like, holy crap, I love her. Like, I love the way she's speaking. I love her journey. It's very close to mine, like however it is. And then, you reach out, and I want to have that conversation a little bit too, because, you're going to reach out, and it doesn't matter who you're reaching out to. There is going to be a cost involved with working with them. Right. And to no matter what, if you feel that vibrational match, to trust that whatever the level of payout that they are asking you for, that you will feel the discomfort of that, but the knowing that if you have that inclination or that nudge or that experience to do the work with that person, it's because that level of income is waiting for you.
Yes. And know that surrender will be part of that journey. Because if your mind, if you already knew how to get the outcome, you would have gotten it. So your ways of doing things, there's a surrender to allow spirit to show you. And it's probably going to be in some way that is different than the way you operate now.
And it's going to scare you.
Exactly.
It should feel wildly uncomfortable, because if it's comfortable, it's not unknown enough to create the newness to become that person.
Exactly. And I just, for people listening, I'm going on 10 years of business. My first year, we can't really count because I was really undercharging and scared. But nonetheless, I was still in business. But I started studying universal law and operating as if it were the truth, right? In that kind of first to second year. And now I'm on year 10, and it hasn't let me down. Like, there's never been a moment where I've said, oh, this really doesn't work. Like, this universal law is shit. It has continued to support me in decisions and things that could be viewed as mistakes. Like, I've been supported by the universe, both financially, energetically, like with messages, with love and support. And it makes me so emotional to think about, because that was not the context I was raised in, right? Which is, life is happening to you and you just wait around until someone gives you a break.
And I think that, it's interesting because you said something that hit me, and I think it's really powerful. It's like when the veil is lifted for us, when we can see that there's a whole other world that nobody seems to notice or be part of, and that it can be beautiful, and there can be ease, and there can be flow and love and light and playfulness and all these kinds of things. Yes. And you're going to want to shout it from the rooftops. You're going to want to get everybody on board. You're going to be like, you don't have to do this. You can come and see the world this way. And not everybody is ready to see it that way, but to celebrate it when you do.
Yes. And don't be afraid to, we started talking about transforming out loud. Like, don't be afraid to share, because you don't know who you'll impact, who's on the precipice. don't be afraid to share. Like today, I sit with my soul every day and allow it to speak to me. When I started, that was unfathomable. That spirit had to swerve my car on the road to get my attention. Like,
well, we talk
so
about
much is
one of the things,
possible.
right? We talk about the feather, the brick, and then the Mack truck, right? Like you are constantly
Exactly.
guided to your soul's purpose, like to your stardust. And, if you just ask to see, just ask to be led, like it's happening anyway. You'll get the signs and they might
Yeah.
come in the form of discomfort of epic levels. Like, I think of some people who get into accidents to realize, or have near-death experiences to realize, and like, you know what I mean? But we are constantly being guided into our truest like version of ourselves, our most authentic light.
Yeah.
I love you. This was like a beautiful conversation, Darla.
Agreed. Thank you for your work in the world. Thank you for not being afraid to speak truth and talk about stardust and make it accessible for people. And I know I just, it took me a long time to really own for myself that I see ahead and that I am an innovator. And, I was in innovation and in corporate and all of that, but it was in a structure, right? So it took a long time to really recognize it. And I just want to mirror back to you, this conversation that you're having is the direction that the world is going. Like I have absolute certainty about that. How long it takes depends on, how willing we each are to speak our truth in the face of no agreement, in the face of, the logical or patriarchal world that might tell us, these are the rules. But thank you for innovating and being willing to put yourself out there so others can be brave enough to stand up.
Thank you. That means a lot, as you know. And I'm so happy to do this with you. Right?
Yeah,
Because,
likewise.
right? Like it takes us all going out and being willing to live into our truth, and no matter what, because there's
No matter
something
what.
bigger that we are here to do than anything that the world is going to tell us against that.
And anything that shows up that seems to be in contrary to that is just making you stronger.
Yes. Yes. And it's funny because I have like all these sayings as coaches, we create these like little, there's a level of we dip low before we grow. That's my little, my little rhyme.
Say that again.
We dip low before we grow.
Yes.
Right? We have that level of like, okay, what's next? And then there's always a beautiful breakthrough at the end of that. So one thing I do like to ask, Darla, because I think it's a really positive, I'm a book nerd, I'm a geek, I love all the information. Without thinking too much about it, whatever comes is the right answer. If you could give a person a book that, you read that was transformative for you, that they might vibrate with when they hear it from you.
Yeah. I love the book. I quoted from it earlier. It's called Breaking the Rules by Kurt Wright. And I think it's pretty obscure. It was assigned reading when I was in coaching school, and I just devoured it like it's falling apart. I quote it often. So just to give people something that they might not otherwise come across. It's really amazing.
Oh, I love that. I love that already. I'm like, I must read this.
Here's the context. He studied companies that are on a roll versus companies that weren't, and looked at companies that had consistent like breakthrough year over year earnings versus ones that had a really big year and then the next year tanked. So it's really specific. And I'll give the punchline is the difference he saw is the companies on a roll focused on what's working and did more of that. And the other companies focused on gaps or things to improve. And that was the difference. And it sounds very practical and logical, which I guess reached me when I read it, but it's very spiritual. Like it's all about healing and about how we work as human beings. And it's really amazing.
Thank you. I love that. I'm totally invested in this already. And Darla, if anybody is like, obviously I love you and, they're going to feel that same level of love towards you. How can they reach out and find you and connect?
Yeah. So I am on social somewhat, Facebook and Instagram, just as Darla LeDoux. And then I also have a podcast, Retreat and Grow Rich is the name of our podcast. And I would love to bring you on. We're going to do a series coming up about spirit in retreats. So I would love to have you for that. I also have what I call the Retreat and Grow Rich Starter Kit, which you can find over at retreatandgrowrich.com/kit. And it's 5 steps of getting started on retreat. So it's who, what, when, where, why, who makes great retreat leaders, what do you do at your retreat, when should you host it, where.
What a great gift that is. And I will make sure that link goes into the show notes as well, so everybody can get their buttocks over there and get that list immediately, because what a game changer that is. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And so, guys, I am so honored to be able to share your Stardust with everybody, because I just loved being in your essence and your light through this conversation with you guys. I now put the videos on YouTube so anyone can go over if you want to like see and feel, because I always think that there's a level of like watching people is really powerful, and like you know, when you leaned in, when you got excited, and like there's just something that happens right when we can see the experience as well. And if we will see you and hear you next Tuesday for Transformation Tuesday. Thank you again, Darla.
Awesome. Thank you, Tamara. Have an amazing day.
You too.